going to get started, but our fourth panelist is working downstairs, so we may not start the 101 section quite until she gets here, because of course she's assigned to the first part. But we will start with introductions. I am Matt Hedding-Hess. I am a counselor in the community. I work at Clove Alliance, which is the local rape crisis center. We changed our name in January, so people may not be familiar with that name, but prior to that, we were called Casey Casa. So I work there full time, and I also work at a private practice, seeing individuals who need counseling. I also run, kind of in my capacity here, I also run the LGBTQ, the Kankakee area LGBTQ network, which is a Facebook group that we're hoping to get a 501c3 for eventually, that just acts as a resource for folks that need resources. So we've linked people with community members for social events, for maybe healthcare providers, mental health providers, just sort of any sort of resources that they may need in the community. We get a lot of people that move new to the community and maybe need some help, parents that might need some support, those sorts of things. So it really is proving to be a great resource in the community, which is of course why we want to nonprofit it. I guess just a little bit more about me, just quickly, is I live in the community. I live in Kankakee here in town with my husband, Josh, and we have a 1-year-old, almost 2-year-old son, RJ. So.
Hello, I am Liam Smietanski. I am a teacher at Nexus Indian Oaks. I teach art. Let's see, what else about me? What else do we have? I don't know. Okay. I use he, they pronouns. I am queer. I am trans. It feels, I grew up within the queer community. I have a lot of gay and queer family members, so to me this was a very natural progression for my own life when I came out. I was very lucky in that matter, so it feels natural to me to be giving back and teaching others how to be accepting and open as well.
Hi, I'm Jen Kafer. I live in Bourbonnais. I am a mom of 2 LGBTQ kids, an 11-year-old and a 16-year-old, so they are teaching me things as I'm going along the journey with them, and it's been a fun ride.
So, okay. And we do have, like I said, a fourth panelist that will be joining us soon. I guess I would like this to be, and I think Vicki also, when we initially talked about what this may look like, would like this to be interactive. So those of you that maybe came prepared with questions, wonderful. But I'm going to pose a challenge to all of you kind of initially, but is there anything that you would like to take from today in particular, or from this panel, just to make sure that we cover it, but also just to kind of maybe kickstart a little bit of discussion while we wait for Celia. Does anybody feel like the brave soul to kind of go first and just volunteer? What are you hoping to take away from coming here today? Yes, you in the red shirt.
I actually work with Matt, so the thing that I hope to take away is working where Matt and I work. Sometimes we have parents who are just, it's new to them and it's challenges and things along those lines. So I guess for me, it's as a clinician, what words of advice or topics or things can I do to assist the parents in supporting their children, if that makes sense. So I know Matt's a great resource, but I want to go straight to the horse's mouth here. And so that's kind of what I hope to get out of this is what can I do as a clinician or maybe other participants as friends or counterparts can do to assist parents with their children, if that makes sense.
Great. You can definitely do that. What else? Anybody else?
Yes, I'd just like to see more representation in our community.
I'm sorry, can you speak a little bit louder?
Oh, yeah, I'd like to see some more representation in the Kankakee area. The reason I'm here is because I saw a flyer at KCP, so I just thought it would be interesting to attend, but I haven't really attended anything like this in the area before, so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great to know. Thanks for being here. Yes.
We work for Harbor House, the local domestic violence agency, and I don't know if I can speak for Kristen, but at least for myself, I don't know a ton about the LGBTQ plus community, and I think we need to know more so we can better support the LGBTQ plus community, especially because the statistics show that members of the LGBTQ plus community are 33% more likely to experience domestic violence than somebody from the heterosexual community. So I think we just really want to learn how to support you better.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you for being here for that. I'd love to see that. Yes?
My name is Alex and I'm with St. John Paul II Catholic Parish. And the reason I'm here is because in my own core, I want to have a better understanding how to embrace our members from this community. And I would like to ask, where do you find yourselves in your faith? And that might help me to understand how to embrace you.
Okay, great. Definitely, I love that. Just to kind of, if anybody else wants to share, please raise your hand. But I will say, the way that we kind of all discussed and wanted to frame this today is we wanted to present, first and foremost, a 101 presentation that just goes over language and kind of, like you mentioned, a little bit of education about the community as a whole. So I hope that there's a lot taken from that. And then we have added a little bit more, beefing it up a little bit more than a typical 101, but we wanted to provide opportunity for questions. And so I hope that the conversation that we start with kind of sparks some big questions, like questions of faith, questions of domestic violence, those sorts of things. So that is my hope. So I keep those questions, please, for the questions section. But yes, we will definitely be addressing those things, and I love that you're coming with those questions. So I appreciate that. So I think we will, what I think we'll do is skip over Celia's part, because Celia's part is kind of movable, I think. So we're gonna do that if that's okay with everyone. And we will jump into, so basically the way that this is posed is basically summed up in this meme. As a person who works with young people in the LGBT community, and I think all of us that have young people in our lives who identify as LGBTQ, this is oftentimes how we feel. Even someone that works in the community and lives in the community and is a gay person myself, it changes so fast. There's so much language and it is so confusing so often. And so I think a great way to start any presentation with regard to the LGBTQ community is talking about language. And so I believe Liam is going to start us off with that. Is that good?
Yeah.
You tell me when to flip slides.
Go ahead, left slide.
Okay.
Okay. So sex is the biological aspect of this. It is what you are born with. Male, female, or intersex. Those are like your three options. And so those are three things, that's one thing that people don't really think of. They mix up the gender and sex all the time, but the reality is that when you are born, you have three options. And as biology stands, it's not just us. Across the board, people, animals, plants, they are male, female, or a combination of the two, which is what intersex is. So that is biology. It is science. It is relatively unchangeable. We can take hormones, but our DNA will always say one of those three things. Gender is a social construct. It is whatever we make it. So typically, in our society, we think of boys and girls. The wonderful thing that's happening right now is that people are taking those, shaking them up, and letting it all come out and just be happy. That's hard to accept for some people, especially people who follow the more traditional gender roles of boy, girl. Boy does this, girl does this. Boy looks like this, girl looks like this. But the newer generation and those of us in the queer community are really opening up to the idea that boys can wear whatever they want, girls can wear whatever they want, boys can do whatever they want, girls can do whatever they want, boys can cry, girls can be strong. Like, it's this wonderful progression of breaking down typical stereotypes from the past. right? So it's a social construct. It is what we make it. Next.
Can you also maybe elaborate a little bit? I think that sometimes intersex is one of those words that people don't get, and there's lots of historical terms that refer to intersex.
Yes.
Can you maybe elaborate on what intersex means?
Absolutely. So intersex used to be, and this is not a proper term anymore, but like hermaphrodite, it's the only one I'm really familiar with, but it's someone who is born with DNA or parts of their body, specifically their genitalia, that might be very ambiguous. It might be somewhat male, somewhat female, perhaps their clitoris is a little bit too enlarged for a female, but they still retain somewhat of a uterus, fallopian tube sort of structure, or perhaps they have, it looks like a female outer part, but then when you actually look internally, it's actually the male parts that are buried inside. So intersex, there's actually a multitude of different types of intersex disorders, for lack of a better term. And it's actually as common as being born red hair. So more people are intersex than people understand, and we need to start opening up that conversation. Up until very recently, it was actually still legal for doctors, without the consent of the parents, to do surgery to correct an intersex child. Up until recent, the parents didn't even have consent over their own children. That conversation has now started and is not happening anymore in most places. Emphasis on most. So that's something we as a community need to continue to work on for our intersex brothers and sisters and siblings.
No. And the only thing I would add is, I think a statistic that is interesting to me is that intersex people are born as often as redheads. So that always kind of is surprising to me, and good information to know that it's not this like rare one-off chance. Like we wouldn't approve of surgeries on redheaded people because we know that people are born redheaded and that's just how they are, and there's lots of them. It's not like this rare genetic disorder or problem. So just that's the only thing I've added. Okay.
So this slide is one of those slides that's kind of talking about how ridiculous our society is about gendering objects. Objects don't have genders. People have genders. But companies are giving objects genders to market specifically to people. You can walk down any aisle at pretty much any store and find something that is gendered for one sex or the other. Here they have the scrub daddy and the scrub mommy, which is like, it's actually made of different materials. One is traditionally made with rougher materials, which you would think of more masculine things, and that's the one they've named scrub daddy. Whereas one is, softer, and it's the scrub mommy. But you can even look at Legos and clothes and shoes and anything. Everything is marketed towards the traditionally more masculine or the traditionally more feminine. And that's something that society does. It's not something that we as humans would actually do if we were just born and let to choose what we wanted to choose. So your gender identity is who you are inside, and your gender expression is who you are on the outside. It's the things that people pick up on and who they see. But your gender identity, even if you say like, I'm gender queer, it may not necessarily outwardly show that you're gender queer. You may look more feminine or you may look more masculine, so people may pick up on those types of things.
Just as a question, does your gender expression always match your gender identity?
No, not at all.
Why not?
Just because of other people's perceptions or your own feelings on any particular day.
Yeah. And I would just add too that some people choose not to express the way they identify for sake of safety, for cost. We always use the example of Caitlyn Jenner, which she's a woman. I was going to say a wonderful woman, but She's been a little problematic lately. She had the access to hormones and surgeries and clothes that she could have an interview one day in a male body, and the next day she was Caitlyn Jenner on the cover of Time magazine, and she was just who she is. And so, not in fact, most people in the trans community don't have access to that. And so there's lots of reasons why your expression may not match your identity. It doesn't make you less trans.
But that also leads into the what society thinks. So someone may say they're trans, but what I think of as trans may not be the same thing as what another person thinks of as trans. So it absolutely, again, has to do with how I feel versus how I'm perceived.
All right. So then the next section so what has happened, I think, and this is just a trend that I've noticed, is that our society has made lots of leaps around the ideal of gay and lesbian couples, even a little bit of progress too with bisexual folks and pansexual folks. And so it's definitely one of those things that there's been lots of movement and acceptance towards LGB people, but the trans folks have kind of been left out of that progress in a lot of ways. And so I think it's just always important to kind of focus on that. So I think for the sake of what the community is really working on right now, we talk a lot about gender identity and gender expression and gender and sex and those sorts of things. But just as a quick recap, because most of you are probably familiar and know someone in your life who identifies as gay, lesbian, or bisexual, or pansexual. Sexual or emotional orientation refers to what a person is, the sex, gender, identity, and expression that a person's attracted to. That might be sexually, romantically, affectionately, emotionally. And so as you'll kind of notice on these slides, I put some of the identities underneath of the definitions that kind of fall within that terminology. But that is really what is referred to as sexual or emotional orientation, is kind of who you're attracted to, who you might date, those sorts of things. But again, we've made a lot of progress within that community. There's still lots of progress to go, but we've made a lot of progress in that area. And then I just put this up as a really great reference. So those of you that are working with people to understand these identities sort of concepts, the gender unicorn I think is a great tool for us to be able to use. I use it a lot in the mental health field and counseling with folks. The great thing about this is that we actually all have a gender identity and a gender expression and a sexual orientation. Oftentimes, if you're not part of the LGBTQ community, you kind of think of like, this stuff doesn't affect me. This actually gives us a chance to look through and say, like, we really all have those parts of our identity, but when we fall within the sort of like socially acceptable norms of our society, it feels like we're not necessarily affected, and so we're not part of that community. The gender unicorn is just a great worksheet. I really love the coloring page, especially if you're working with young folks, to be able to drive that point home. And so what you'll see up on here is I kind of filled it out for myself. My gender identity is male, and so I marked myself all the way to the right on the male line. I don't identify as female or with other genders. My expression, I think, tends to be a combination of all those things, both feminine, masculine, and outside of the gender norms. So I put a little bit of all three of those lines. And by what I mean by that is, I'm wearing my Timbs today, which may be seen as more masculine clothes, right? I have facial hair and short hair. Those sorts of things are considered masculine. But I talk with my hands. I'm emotional. I talk about my feelings. I cry. I don't like sports. All these other things that might be considered socially maybe more feminine. And so, I embrace those parts of my identity. And then again, under the sexual attraction and emotional attraction, I kind of mark where I identify on that spectrum. I consider myself gay, but as you can kind of see on there, that doesn't necessarily mean that I only am attracted to men. That's kind of that identifying term is important to the relationship that I'm in presently, but doesn't necessarily encompass all of who I am. So at any rate, this is Googleable. If you type in gender unicorn on Google, this is what will pop up. So like I said, it's just a really great resource for folks that are trying to help maybe parents understand or clients explore their identity a little bit more. So I just wanted to make sure to introduce it. Yeah?
Matt, will these identities stay the same all the time?
No, they do not. That's why it is a spectrum. You'll find a lot of people, I asking us questions. That's great. You'll find that one of the terms that we use within the community is non-binary. The binary refers to, bi means what? Two, yes. So it refers to these two boxes. You're either this or that. You're either male or female. You're either gay or straight, maybe. These binaries are really, research has shown, and that's where this comes from, is research. That's not how people exist. They exist on spectrums, like this long line, and people shift throughout their life, maybe throughout the day, along those spectrums. And so yes, it does shift. And as Liam referenced earlier, the category that does stay more static is that sex assigned at birth. Obviously, you're assigned a sex at birth based on your hormones, chromosomes, what they see physically in your genitalia. Of course, some of that sex changes with hormones, like Liam referenced. But generally, that is a more static identity. But the rest of them change very much throughout one's life. Okay. All right. Jen, do you mind if I pull Celia in
Sure.
before we jump into yours?
Absolutely.
Because I think
I
yours
don't
should be-
mind, actually. That's what I was trying to say.
So we'll go back. Celia, do you want to introduce yourself before?
Sure. Okay. Can y'all hear me? Is this on? Perfect. Got thumbs up right there. I am Celia Greer, aka Miss G. I can tell the teens to call me that. I work down in the teen zone. I'm a teen coordinator of the library, and I consider myself a lesbian. I have 4 children. My oldest is 6. My youngest are 3. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do math. And I have quite a bit to share about myself that I won't be able to do that today. But I'm very open to learning. For the last 3.5, 4 years, I've been learning so much about myself that I got the opportunity. Vicky actually texted me one day and was like, hey, met up with Matt and he's doing, LGBTQ panel. Would you like to be a part? And I'm like, I know she was waiting for me to text back, but I'm sitting there staring on my phone like, I don't know, Vicky. So she texted back and says, if you don't want to do it, I'm like, no, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it. But I can honestly say I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to get to know these people up here. They seem like a pretty cool bunch. I'm gonna call y'all my family from now on, if that's okay.
We're family.
Yeah, we're family. We are. But I'm happy to be here, so thanks y'all for coming. If y'all didn't do that already, I'm sure you did. But thank everybody for coming. And excuse my lateness. I had another teen girl event downstairs, and if you see me text, I'll make sure everybody got home safely. But glad you all have me here.
So you can jump right into your...
Okay. Well, so basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, because I had a lot going on, and my portion is basically talking about what we deal with as related to coming out and just finally being true to who we are. And I can honestly relate to that because I just officially, I'm 29 years old and a half. I'll be 30 in February. And I just recently came out. And a lot has happened in my coming out. And at one point I was married, thought I was saving myself from being a lesbian. And my parents were in the church, pastors, strong religious family, grew up with a religious background. And I thought that, I knew my whole life that something was wrong, not wrong, but that's what I was taught. But I knew something was different about me when I'm watching commercials and I see a lady like, she is pretty. And that's not something that I was able to say because I would be penalized or I would be basically in trouble for saying something like that. It was a disgrace. They say God says it's an abomination. And one thing about me, I cherish my relationship with God, number one. So it was hard for me to make the decision on being who I know I am rather than being who other people wanted me to be. So I jumped on this opportunity to talk about what we face in coming out. So that's what we're about to talk about.
Just tell me when to switch the slides.
Okay.
Got your video next.
Yeah, so this video, first 60 seconds of the video, if we got time, we can watch it. But this video basically shares some of their coming out instances of what they battled with before they come out. And I can say honestly related to this, which is why it resonated with me and I wanted to share it with you all as well. So, first 60 seconds.
I feel empowered, I feel like the Dimitri Post diagnosis loves every inch of himself. Ask your healthcare provider if Big Tarby is right.
That's not it.
When I think about who I was as a person before I came out, a lot of it was me trying to be this person that I knew that I wasn't.
I think the most important word that jumps out at me is closed off, that I think I was trying to hide so much.
I remember thinking this was the worst thing that could have happened to me and that God hated me or something like that. And I remember going to church and being like, oh my God, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I know I'm not normal, please help me out.
I never really opened up to anyone. I had a really hard time. Pretty much just kept like a wall between me, even my closest friends. Like if we were ever having a conversation about being gay, I would always like kind of overreact and be like, oh no, it's gross, so people like would absolutely not think anything about me. In the job that I had, I like worked in kind of a corporate world, and I like didn't feel comfortable sharing my sexual identity with people that I worked with. I would like wear like cute leather flats and like skirts, and like I hated it. It was what I thought I needed to do to survive.
I love things like dance and figure skating, and I could speak the language.
So, I know it makes you want to watch more. But the first 60 seconds of that resonated with me because I literally, and I know it's not just me, I'm only coming from a personal experience because I feel, especially working with teens, that's the best way we can relate with them. When they see and know that, oh, you went through this? Okay, well maybe, they might give me a little bit of leeway. But I like to come from a personal experience because I can only give you my perspective on how I feel and what I experience. But that video, the first 60 seconds of that video resonated with me because literally everything all of them said was what I battled with in my head. And it's hard to realize that this part of you is okay, especially when you were raised and taught the complete opposite. So like being raised in the church, being raised to be this leader that you don't really want to be underneath the leadership of your parents. So everybody's looking at you, expecting you to be a certain way. I used to have kids, even in high school, kids look at me and be like, you dancing, you Dougie, you're not supposed to be doing that, because my dad was a pastor. So it was a lot of weird restrictions that people would give me to like where I couldn't be a kid, let alone be myself. I knew I did not have that much of an attraction to boys growing up, but I would ignore that part because of everything that everyone said in the beginning, especially my relationship with God. I felt like there was something wrong with me. It was known as a mental disorder years ago to be attracted to the same sex. I felt like I had a mental disorder. A lot of things that I saw, and also being raised not just as a pastor's kid, but being raised in the church. The type of church that I went to, I was only able to wear skirts. I couldn't wear earrings, I couldn't wear makeup, couldn't wear pants, I couldn't play sports, couldn't go to the movies, no boyfriends, literally nothing. None of that. That was my upbringing. I know my life sounded like it sucked, didn't it? But again, being in that type of environment, being raised in an environment, it's easier to dress up your hate as religion. And growing up, I realized that a lot of people that were in my life, including my family, sad to say, and family as in mom, dad, and siblings, a lot of people really are homophobic. And you learn that when you're the only one. I'm one of six kids. I'm number 3. And I've always been one to speak out, especially when I felt uncomfortable and felt weird about certain things. And it's harder for you to be able to speak out when everybody else is just going with the flow and just living how your parents are telling you to live or how they say this Bible is telling you to live and certain things like that. But to get back on track, the first 60 seconds of the video is what hit me. And that's what I know most, especially of our teens, struggle with when it comes to wanting to come out, when it comes to trying to find somebody to trust, when, even if it's just a thought, because that's how it started with me. It was just, I remember walking through the school halls and I immediately, it hit me like, I think I'm attracted to girls. After I realized I'm looking at, you know, commercials and looking at certain females in school and all that, I'm like, she's very pretty. Like, I would date her. Then it hit like, I think I'm attracted to girls. But I was never able to share that because of what everyone in the first 60 seconds of that video said. It hit me. It was a fear that was placed over me because of who I knew I really was. So again, basically this slide is talking about what we battle with. Our first battle, I feel, is with ourselves. We battle with ourselves with thought, we battle with ourselves with, we hurt ourselves more than I feel like we could hurt someone else. For me, I was afraid of hurting other people, and me being honest in who I was and who I knew I wanted to be. I also, development and growth, it's a myth that if you come out as gay, lesbian, trans, whatever, that you have some type of alt with a family member or something happened to you, or I don't like when people try to analyze why people are the way they are. I don't like trying to be diagnosed by people that don't have a degree. I have a huge problem with that. But the battle also stunts you of your growth, because being able to come out as who you are allows you to have the proper development of who you're supposed to be, even if it's not for you. But I always believe that I go through certain things for other people, whether that's people that I might not have agreed with in my earlier days. I never thought that I would be sitting here today, I'm gonna be honest with you. I never thought that I would be sitting here today, only because I was always forced to testify the opposite in church. Like, when I say forced, I mean I had no choice. No choice. And if I didn't do it, I was shunned, or I was, I had to stand in front of the church and expose myself and tell everybody that I was, liking girls, and I had to be silenced and sat down in the church. So I was honestly stunted of my growth a long time ago. And these last 3.5 years have allowed me to create my own pace and to allow myself to love me just as I am. And that's it for that one. First battle is we battle with ourselves.
You want to say it next?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't say it, I'm sorry.
That's great.
So this slide basically shares the people that I felt like are an influence in our lives that would allow us to be afraid of coming out. These are people that I feel are the greatest influencers in human life today, and that's our friends, families, peers, and even strangers. And we have a fear, I had a fear, I'm gonna speak about myself, I had a fear of being judged by other people. I have even today, to this day, I have people that, like, I like to go to the store with my kids. Again, I have 4 kids, I love my babies. And I would get stares from people that I don't know, and it's usually older women that would stare at me. Because how I dress is how I dress, and I don't think people would know that I'm a lesbian unless I said it. So they would look at me and see my kids, and I would automatically be stigmatized, automatically. Because I look like a single mom with my kids, I look like a gay single mom with my kids, I look like I might have a woman at home and they still judging me. So I honestly believe that these 4 are the biggest and greatest influencers, and that's something that we also battle with as well in coming out, especially in today's time. Because not only am I a lesbian, I am also a Black woman. So it's also not harder, but for me, it's harder for me to be able to accept this part of me as well and still be a Black woman living in America. So dealing with that is easier to me my whole life. It was easier for me to keep that to myself and to never be upfront and be honest with anyone. I didn't see the need to until I actually did it.
Can I just add something before you say it? So when I saw the slide and was kind of reviewing this is also a really great model for when we come out, right? Because people think about coming out as this one thing that happens when, I was 19, I came out to my parents, and that was the big thing.
Right.
And that was such a significant moment in my life, but that's not really what coming out is. Coming out is a lifetime experience.
Yes.
And like you mentioned, first you come out to yourself, and then oftentimes what happens is you come out to friends, you're testing the waters, then you come out to family, then you come out to your peers, and maybe at work, or people that acquaintances. And then ultimately you get to a comfort of being able to come out to strangers, sitting in front of panels like this where where you can kind of come out, but know that it is an everyday, oftentimes it's an everyday thing for LGBTQ people to come out. When I do these presentations, I'm coming out to a room of strangers often, every time I do that. So there's still a risk associated with that. That risk becomes less and less important and less effective on me, but there's still a risk of doing that. So I love that kind of, it's very full circle.
Yeah. So again, talking about the battle. I'm not going to read everything up here, but the battle plus the battle, and the battle plus the battle is, the first battle is ourselves, the second battle is everyone that you feel, for me, it was always the people that I would have never expected to turn on me the way they did. It always ended up like that. Like, even when I was like, well, they wouldn't do that to me. They did it. So I stopped saying it to myself. I stopped saying they wouldn't do that. And now I just take whatever it is, because at first coming out, when I came out to myself first, it was huge for me. When I first said out of my mouth that I am a lesbian, it was literally like, I don't know, it was like a weight lifted off of me. And it was necessary for me to do that, because it's being honest with me first. So that when I do go and talk to family, friends, peers, strangers, or whatever, and most of the people that I knew were in the church, no one can persuade me to be someone else that I know I'm not. So being honest and upfront with myself first is where I created that foundation for me to be open and able to say, no, that's what you want me to be, but I know who I am. And that's why I was able to put my foot down and let people know, don't tell me who you think I'm supposed to be. So the battle plus the battle is ourselves, plus the battle that we deal with when it comes to coming out to your friends, families, peers, strangers, whatever it is. And all of these things that I've mentioned here are certain things that I've witnessed. Certain teens go through, even adults go through, substance abuse, fear of what and who we lose, mental breakdowns, homelessness. I was definitely homeless for 8 weeks, almost 2.5 months, working here. When I first got this job, I had to leave my home because I was harassed out of my home due to me being honest about where I was while married. I had to leave my home, literally. And me and my 4 kids stayed in a hotel for 4 weeks, and then I ended up staying with a coworker for about 2.5, 3 weeks. And I can honestly happily say today I am divorced. But looking back at that, definitely made me realize that certain family might make it harder for you, especially if you're in a place where you're not sure yet. Certain family made it harder for me. And it's like, even to this day, it's easier for me now because, again, I was able to have that reassurance, that acceptance of myself. My kids accept me. But family and friends, especially if they don't want you to be that way, will make it harder for you to be able to accept who you really are. Mental breakdown, unnecessary aggression that we might give because of being so used to being rejected by people who were close to you. It's easier to protect yourself. It's easier to hide in a shell. And if someone says something that sounds like they're against you, I'm biting your head off. Because I dealt with that for 3 years already. I dealt with that for 4 years already. I'll either bite your head off or I'll cut you off. Either or. It's easier that way. So that unnecessary aggression that you might get would probably be smoke from what I've been getting for 3.5, 4 years straight, like literally every day. And then rejection, suicide, things like that, insecurities. You can go to the next slide.
It's okay, just want to keep adding. Yeah. I just want to address, because one of our audience members kind of talked a little bit about some questions and what they hope to take away. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of relates to that is, all of these things that Celia put up here really do reference the higher rates that LGBTQ folks experience these things. And I just want to drive home the point that it's not because of mental disorders, right? Like you mentioned, there was a time when we were pathologized in that way, and it was said that we experience these things because we're mentally ill. But the reality is, like homelessness, I just want to put a statistic out there. 40% of all the homeless youth in the United States identify as LGBTQ. That is not because they are choosing homelessness. That's because they're rejected by their families.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely. Higher rates of substance use, higher rates of mental health issues, all of those things. Not related to the mental illness of themselves, but related to the rejection that they face from society and family members. So just wanted to kind of drive that home point.
Thanks. And last but not least, I have 3 important quotes that I have for myself, and I'm gonna try to read them with. Matter of fact, Vicky, I'm gonna take this off the stand. Our coming out is the most central point, the most crucial point of our freedom. It is the first step in what allows us to begin our self-relationship, to become whole and solid in who we are. That's the first one. The second one is, do not take this opportunity from your child, your friend, a relative, or sibling. Do not tell your child's business, your friend's business, relatives, especially when it's something as crucial as this. It has to come from them. It has to. And when it comes from them, that allows you to know that they're accepting who they are. It allows them to know also that you got their back, always. And you're not telling them so they hear from them first, and then when the person tells them, it's more of I want to warn you. You ain't got to warn nobody about someone else's, sexual orientation. You don't have to warn people. People should be accepted the way they are, and not analyzed because of how they look, but accepted just by you looking at them and seeing them as a human being with feelings, period. And last but not least, we may lose some in the process, but we will always gain more. As I said before, I lost most, and I considered my relationship with my family, we were very close, and everybody knew I was a dog for my family. Like, if I heard you talking and running your mouth about my family, I was ready to square up, but they didn't feel the same about me, which to this day I'm okay with now, but before it hurt, because it's like you put yourself on the line for people that won't do the same for you, especially in your time of need. And at the time of me coming out, I was also in a very toxic marriage. And when I saw that I was alone, that's when I realized I lost more. At that time, I felt like I had lost more because, again, I would lay on the track for my family. I would save my family as best as I could. But in the process of me losing, there was always somebody every day that showed me and that told me. There was a lot of people in my inbox on Facebook that would tell me, don't stop telling your story. Keep going, you're helping me. Even people that I wouldn't expect was telling me that I didn't know you was going through this. Look, this is what's going on with me. And it wasn't for me to save them, but it was for me to be a listening ear. Because you never know, you could be saving somebody's life just by listening. You never know who's on the edge. And I was happy that in that time of me losing what I lost, it allowed me to gain more. And that's these people up here, that's the group that I joined, that's the people at my job, I've gained so much. And I'm honestly happy to say that I did not lose a family. I created my own, and that's probably the best thing that you can do when it comes to situations like this. So I think that's my last slide.
Okay.
And I'm done.
You just got educated by Miss G, so you were very lucky today. All right.
All right, so I guess it's my turn. First of all, I want to thank all 3 of you folks for giving us your emotional labor and educating all of us. That's awesome, and I know it's a lot of work sometimes. So we're going to talk about pronouns. Obviously, closer to the microphone. Oh, sorry.
If it's easier to look back, I just hold it.
Yeah,
I
don't know.
I'll
be all right. So pronouns. Obviously, we all know what pronouns are. We went to English, class in school. One of the big things you'll hear people argue about these days is, people will say, these are my pronouns, she, her, he, him, they, them. There is also sie, zer, which is another gender-neutral pronoun that some folks use. And you'll hear the argument of people saying, well, you can't use they to refer to a single person, right? I don't know if y'all see this, it drives me insane. But actually, they, as a singular pronoun, dates all the way back to 1375. It was used for the first time in a medieval romance novel. So we, as a collective, have made it into the word that it is. But in reality, we all use they all the time without realizing that we even do it. If I see this water sitting here, I would say, oh, I wonder who left their water here. I wouldn't say, I wonder, she left her water here. I wouldn't assume the gender of the person who left the water here. So we use it all the time in the singular, and I don't understand why people have such a problem with it. The word you also used to be a plural pronoun, which I found interesting when I was doing a little research. Why is using the correct pronouns important? First of all, you may hear some people say preferred pronouns. A lot of folks that I have learned from in the trans, non-binary community don't like that word because preferred means that it's a choice. And so it's just their pronouns, it's their correct pronouns. One reason it's so important is the Trevor Project, which is one of the biggest organizations that advocates for LGBTQ youth, found that kids whose people that they're around every day that use their correct name and pronouns are half as likely to attempt suicide as those who don't. And for parents like me and those of us that have friends who are we just want our kids to stay alive. We just want people to treat them the way they are asking to be treated, to use their correct name, correct pronouns, that sort of thing. So we can go on to the next slide, Matt. So these are some gender neutral terms to address a group of people. So if you could, when we're all gathered here today, instead of using the old ladies and gentlemen, we could use any of these words, which some of them are really funny. And this has gone around for quite a while. So just something to keep in mind when you're referring to a big group of people. Friends, I always like to say friends because I feel like that's the most inclusive. You have your team at work or your crew, instead of saying guys or things like that. Excellent. Okay, so boundaries. Everything that I talk about here is things I have learned from either my children's lived experience or by educating myself, talking to other people about their lived experience. This isn't my own experience. I just want to say that. But some of the most important things that they have said is don't discuss someone's gender identification or sexuality don't discuss their gender or sexuality with other people, just like Celia said. That is a matter that when they are ready, they will talk about it. It's not up to us to tell their story. Every time I've done a few talks, and I always talk to my kids, and I say, is it okay for me to talk about this? And sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they say, I don't want you to talk about that part. I'm like, okay, cool, then we won't. One-on-one conversations are a little bit different, when it's something that's not recorded and not going to be posted on YouTube. Another boundary is that we have to remember that people who are members of the LGBTQ community are very diverse. They have lots of identities. They're not just part of the LGBTQ community. They are teachers or parents. They are all races. They have their faiths. They have everything. And so don't do something like, hey, George, you're gay. My friend Joe's gay. Do you know him? Let's don't do that. Because all the gay people don't know each other. They don't.
It's close, but not quite.
And don't ask personal questions of people that you wouldn't think to ask your cisgender heterosexual friends. Yeah. So I would never ask any of my cishet friends how they have sex, or I would never ask them what their genitals are like, or what sort of medical treatments they do. That's not my business. So people sometimes tend to think that it's okay to be curious about these things, and it's just don't ask the questions. if the person wants to open up and tell you, that's their responsibility, but don't ask, don't pry. Big thing is if you don't know what someone's, like what their pronouns are, ask them. Use yours when you introduce yourself to people. So I usually, and I realize I didn't tonight, but I usually say, my name is Jen, I use she, her pronouns. And that invites the other person to tell you what theirs are. If you hear someone using the wrong pronoun for someone, or misgendering someone, using their incorrect name, correct them, stand up for that person. People like Matt had said, coming out is, it's their whole lives. So any emotional labor that we can take away from people to protect themselves, especially when they're younger and they're learning and they're growing and they're trying to figure out who they are and how to stand up for themselves, it's very important that we do some of that work for them. And along the way, it teaches them, kind of how to stand up for themselves. So being an advocate, you can look up how to be an advocate, and lots of things will tell you lots of different definitions, but I always say, as a person who is outside the community, you really shouldn't call yourself an advocate or an ally. That's up for someone into the community to decide if you're doing what you should be doing to help them along their journey. But oppression of people who are LGBTQ+ should be everybody's concern. We should all be worried about how trans folks are being treated, about people's rights being taken away. We should all worry about that. And that's our job. When I say our, I mean people that identify the way I do. As a white, cis, het person, that's my job, is to keep working to take more work off of those who are oppressed. Remember that people who are LGBTQ they're the experts in their own experience. So it's not up to us to say, well, that joke's not homophobic, or that's not transphobic. That's not up to us to say. If someone is a member of the community and says, what you said hurt me, it's our job to sit and listen and be like, ooh, yeah, okay, I get it. Instead of trying to rationalize or make excuses for ourselves. And that's one big thing. I do have a trans child, and I had a child who I used one name and pronouns for 10 years, almost 11 years. And so I screw up. I do mess up. And I have learned that they like it when I apologize. Some people don't. But I will apologize, and then we move on. I don't make it about myself. I don't say, oh, it's so hard for me. You were my little person, and I this and that. It's not about me. It's not about me. It's not my journey. It's about them. And so I've learned to take myself out of it and center it as I'm a human. I make mistakes. I'm sorry. I'll do better. One little trick that I do is something I read online, is when I have used an incorrect pronoun for someone or an incorrect name, I repeat it in my head 3 times. So I'll say like, he is intelligent. He is, like I'll use sentences about that person in my head, kind of just tricks my brain into remembering to remember to use the correct name and pronoun. And the biggest thing is making sure we don't overshadow people. We don't make it about us. We just let people tell their stories and support them the best way that we can. So, that's kind of it.
Wonderful. I would just like to jump on and say sometimes us in the community, we tend to use words that we need to define for some people. So I just wanted to, Jen reference being cis-het, and I just wanted to reference that to define that for everyone. Cis-het refers to cisgender and heterosexual. So cisgender means that your assigned sex at birth matches your gender identity and gender expression, or maybe gender expression. And heterosexual, obviously, most people know, means that you are attracted to people of a different sex than you. Okay, so we shorten that. We shorten a lot of things actually in the community. So that's what cis-het means. All right, so, do you want me to cover this one?
Oh,
I don't know if you wanted to or not. I don't mind doing it.
You can go ahead if you want. Yeah.
So one of the things that we wanted to make sure to add on here was resources, because obviously all four of us like to be resources and like to be asked these questions, and we're opening up in this panel to do that. But sometimes there are definitely resources that are available within the community that have specializations. Our community is one of those communities that I feel like growing up here, I felt like we just didn't have anything here for LGBTQ young people. And that's how I felt growing up. And so as an adult, where I can, I try to change that. So that is the reason behind my starting the Kankakee Area LGBTQ Network. It is a Facebook group for now, but folks can add themselves to that if they fall as part of the community or really feel strongly that they're an ally in the community. Obviously, I would be the contact person for that, so if you ever have questions that maybe I could pose to the resource, to the community, I'm welcome to do that. I think all four of us would be willing to do that. But I just wanted to also point out some sort of statewide or like not so local resources because they cover the whole state. One of my, I'll start with Equality Illinois first of all. Equality Illinois is a legal resource, so they do a lot of legal work in the community or in the state for LGBTQ folks, so that is a great resource there. We've had I don't know if he's actually the president anymore, but Mike Ziri was the president at one point, and he's come down to the community a couple times and spoken to different things. They're a great resource. Brave Space Alliance is a organization in Chicago that is Black and trans started and run. They are also a really great resource specifically for communities of color, so I'd just like to make sure to put that on there as well. Illinois Safe Schools Alliance is a school resource. So one of the things that I don't hear much about it anymore, but when at some point there was a lot of talk about bathroom usage for trans folks. Illinois Safe Schools Alliance provided policy templates for schools to include inclusive bathroom policies and things like that that were affirming of trans folks. So they do things like that. They have a lot of like template policies that are affirming. They work with schools that maybe have questions of how they can kind of work through some of these maybe more questionable things that they're not used to, and do so in an affirming way. So they're a great resource. They also run a great camp in the summer that I've gotten the opportunity to camp counsel for, and it's like a queer utopia getting to go every year. So if that's something that you have a young person who might be interested in, contact me. I can get you in contact with them. They're just a great organization. And then I know Jen referenced the Trevor Project at one point as well. The Trevor Project runs the LGBTQ Youth Suicide Hotline. It's not just for youth that are suicidal, but they do a lot of really great work. So they run the hotline. They also have an instant message line or like a text line as well. Too, yeah. So again, just making it as accessible as possible for folks is really just great work. So those are kind of the big ones that I always like to point out. I know Jen had another resource that she talked about. If you mind sharing a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. I volunteer for an organization called Ally Parents, and it is a nationwide database, so it's basically a spreadsheet that lists affirming parents in different states, and kids can text us, and basically it's just called love on the other end of the line. We're not counselors, we're not trained for anything, but we do have access to resources, so if someone contacts us, we can point them in the right direction, and we just listen. So when they're struggling with like their living situation or their families, we can just provide an affirming, safe space for them to vent those feelings.
Jen, is that a resource that parents could text as well?
Absolutely, I have had parents text me too, yes. And some parents just, they're like, I want to do the right thing, I don't want to mess up. So, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you. All right, so that concludes our PowerPoint. But I know that there were some questions that were asked, so I guess based on what you've heard already, if you were, I know she has to go somewhere else, it's okay. If you were kind of inspired to ask another question or kind of reframe your question, or if you just want to reiterate it so that all four of us could hear it, ask away. I guess we're open books and ready to try to answer.
Okay, so yeah. Thank you, Cecilia, for sharing about your faith and your relationship with God. I love your understanding about your faith, your clarity. I think that makes a human person more resilient.
Yeah.
And then that's one of my areas to provide strong faith to individuals. So I would love to hear from the other panelists if we could share about their faith.
I don't mind starting, or you want to start, Liam?
I can. So, for the people at home, the question was about dealing with faith and being a part of the LGBTQ community. How can people who want to be allies be a better ally? And how do those of us who are in the community, how do we kind of ration with what the Bible might say or with what our religion might teach? Yes?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I was baptized and raised Catholic on my father's side, and my mother's side was Lutheran. Neither of my parents were very strict. However, I also went to a Catholic school, which was very strict. And I went to a Catholic school from 3-year-old preschool all the way through senior in high school. And that was, for me, a nightmare. But it also gave me kind of this tool, it gave me the tools to understand and question parts of myself and a written text that was in front of me that they were teaching me from. And I ended up, after I left high school, going through a whole bunch of different religions. What I found was that most religions say almost the exact same thing. Everything boils down to there's a higher power, that higher power believes in love, and that to some degree we are created in that higher power's image. I personally do not believe that we would be made in the image of that higher power in a way that was not part of that higher power to begin with. So if the higher power wanted us to all be heterosexual, we would have been that way. If that higher power wants us to all be gay, we all would have been gay. If that higher power wants us to be happy, we're going to all be different and be diverse, and we're just here on earth to love one another as that higher power wants us to love one another. And so from that jumping point, that's where I've gone, is religion wants us to love one another because we are created in the higher power's image, and that higher power wants us to love one another. So that's kind of my own religion of where we are. We're here to love.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
And I'll just share, I was brought up Lutheran as well. Not super serious, like you mentioned. But we went to church most weekends. And I was confirmed and baptized and all those things as well. As I came out, those things, I knew that my church didn't agree with that part of my identity. That was very clear from sermons, and there was even an argument about getting my ears pierced at one point that my pastor was involved with. Things. There was just those subtle messages that tell us too that you're just not that authentic self is not welcome here. That's not okay here. And so that was definitely the message that I got. And I think like a lot of LGBTQ people, I was turned away from the church. I decided that was not for me. I didn't agree with those things, and that was not going to be a part of my life. And I also had a very similar journey in school. We learned about a lot of world religions, and I had a similar sort of understanding of like, it all boils down to the same thing. In fact, I will share during my internship, it's kind of coincidence and kind of crazy that it ended up this way, but my internship for my counseling degree was with a practice called interfaith counseling for pastoral care and counseling, and I was like, what am I doing here? However, the woman that I was interning under is a wonderful, wise, amazing woman, and I had a really cool kind of spiritual journey in that internship, so I'll get to that in a second. But through that world religions class, I very much had this sort of kind of maybe a more spiritual, maybe I'm a little bit more agnostic, like there's something but I don't know what it is, and I'm okay with not knowing what it is. Like I can be a good person and an authentic person, and just kind of spirituality looks different. It doesn't have to be going to church every week and praying and all those things. That's kind of where I got to. My husband, his father is a Baptist pastor. So our journey dating, they actually found out that he was gay when we started dating, so there was lots of drama around that. When we got married, there was more drama with regard to that. And I think that's been an eye-opening journey for me as well, because I think my husband is experiencing a spiritual journey, a little bit tardy to mine, right? Like I had this sort of journey after coming out. His has been a little later than mine was. And so it's been a journey with his family too, and their understanding of our relationship and our family. But I will just share, my internship, my internship supervisor did share with me a quote or kind of a reference to a book that talked about really what Liam is referring to. It's talking about one river. The book is called One River, Many Streams, or something along those lines. One River, Many Streams, I think that's right. And really what she kind of talked me through and what I was experiencing during internship was finding that river that connects all the wells. That's what it is, one river, many wells. And so she shared that, many people have this spiritual journey where they dig down a well, and when they don't find the answers that they're looking for, they jump to a different well and try to dig down that well and see if that one fits. When in reality, if we dig deeper into that well, what we find is that they're all connected by the same river. And I think that was really sort of moving for me, and it really spoke to the spiritual journey that I was experiencing during my internship, as I was kind of having these sort of spirituality conversations with clients and realizing that we really all want the same thing. And we're speaking different language sometimes, but it's really all the same thing. We want to be loved and accepted, and we want to be seen and affirmed. So that's kind of where I am, if that makes sense. Very much the spirituality can look different ways, and I find my connection with whatever that higher power is in lots of ways that aren't necessarily going to church or praying or maybe more traditional ways. Jen, do you want to add anything?
The only thing I would like to add is that I would have a hard time as a parent taking my children to a building and having them sit there and someone tell them that they were less than. So we don't go to church anymore. We haven't for a long time. I was raised Catholic. And we do have our own spirituality as well. We do it in our own way. But I guess for me, the most important thing is those messages are hammered, it's a tough word, but into us when we're sitting there and we're listening to people talk, and it creates a lot of internal homophobia, even if you don't know it, even if you don't realize that's what you're doing. It puts those images in people's, and I never want my kids to feel ashamed of who they are. So I would have a hard time. I mean, we have attended a couple of affirming churches, but affirming is the important part to me, because you'll hear people say, well, this church is accepting. Well, what that means is that church will tell you, it's okay who you are, you're a sinner, but that's what acceptance means. And affirming means, you're a beautiful child of God, created just like me, and you are just as worthy and just as deserving of everything as everybody else. So I think, if you're wanting your church to be affirming, that's where you have to go. You have to get to that point. How do you get there? I don't know.
And just on the topic of open and affirming, do you want to talk?
Oh yeah, real quick.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that the way I grew up, I was introduced to a God who was angry. That's what it seemed like to me as a kid. Like as a kid, I was scared of God. Like hearing about these stories in the Bible where God would just drop people dead at the altar, or if you have any type of sin or filth on you, God would strike you down, Cain and Abel, just hearing all these different stories. And then growing up with that same mentality that I was afraid to even curse, because I thought God would literally drop me right where I was. But in the church, this is my opinion, but in the church, it seemed as if we're introduced to death way more than we are to a loving God. And we're taught heaven or hell, we're taught wrong and right, literally black or white. And there's no, I don't want to say in between, but I do want to say in between, where in actuality, we're all human. And as I got to a point where I was able to understand certain things, I met a guy, Jermaine Thomas is his name, and he said something simple to me, and it stuck with me ever since I've known him. And one thing he said was, first of all, we're all, like Liam stated, we're all put here to love. Love, and that's who and what God is to me. Love. Prime example of what love is, who love is. It could be a man, a woman, it could be your kids, it could be your best friend, it could be literally, God is love. And you can do the greatest, you can give to charities, you can give to, you can bring in your homeless friend or a homeless family, you can bring the dead back to life. But none of that matters if you don't have love, because that's who God is. And when I realized that, I started living my life not as if, but I began to live my life based off of love. And when I realized that I'm human and I deserve love too, the way that I give it, that might not be with a man. To me, it's not. So I know for a fact that I am loved by God, by my people, by whomever wants to look at me and say, you're human too. So that's my religion. I don't go to church anymore, but my relationship with God, kind of like what Matt said, my relationship with God is just that, just like my relationship with my kids is just that. Their relationship with their dad is theirs. I can't tell nobody how to have a relationship with God or with, what they do when it comes to religion, how they celebrate life or whatever, but I know my stance and my relationship with who God is, period.
And I was just going to share another resource. Our community does have an open and affirming church, St. John's United Church of Christ. The pastor is a wonderful woman who has done also amazing work. She should definitely be sitting up here with us. She's an amazing woman named Barb Lorbach. I just found out she's retiring, so I want to cry when I think about it. But she's a great resource for parents. She's a great resource for just everything. This conversation she's had a million times, and I think she's just a great resource. So the churches, they do great work. So just another resource in our community. So I hope that answered some questions.
A lot. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you have more questions, raise your hand. Please let me know. But I do want to reference just the folks from Harbor House, because you guys talked in the beginning about really how to work with your clients the best way. And I just, coming from the social services field, I just have opinions on that. And please jump in, as I share a little bit about this too. My sort of stance is, get educated, come to these sorts of things, and then change your policies, change your paperwork to be reflective of whatever you can. My policy with a new client is, it's on our paperwork now. We have pronouns on our paperwork. But in a session when I sit down with a person, it's pretty much the first thing that I do is I introduce myself with my pronouns and then open up the door for them to share their pronouns. And usually me sharing my pronouns does that. And that can help start a conversation. Oftentimes we have paperwork that maybe they can circle their sexual orientation or their gender, but you can't necessarily assume that that's always going to be truthful, because I think a lot of people are skeptical of paperwork like that sometimes. So start with introductions, pronouns and things like that. Don't be afraid of those conversations and those resources, especially within the counseling field. We talk about, I work with sexual abuse, right? So sexual orientation is an important conversation to have as a part of that. And I tend to want to bring it up because I'm sure just like with folks at Harbor House deal with, we can't assume that if a woman's sitting in front of us, we can't assume that the perpetrator of the domestic violence or the sexual assault is a man. We can't make those assumptions. And I think that was referenced on one of Jen's slides, is you don't make assumptions. It's just not a safe thing to do in 2021. I think there was a time where you could look at a person and you could use whatever pronouns you kind of assumed for them, but it's just not okay to do that in 2021. We know better, so we should do better. So that's one thing. And I also am definitely an encourager of making your, and I know Harbor House already does this, but making your paperwork and things be reflective of your openness to working with the community. Having a rainbow on your pamphlets, I know you should definitely do more than just that, but that is a big signifier for folks who walk in the front door and see a rainbow sticker on the front door, that maybe this is a safe place, right? I may still have some guards up, but just the mere fact that they thought to do that does signify something important to me. I do feel safer going into a business or an organization that does that. Same thing with, affirming sort of posters in my office and things like that. It makes a big difference to have those sort of like tiny signifiers. And I'll tell you, folks who are not LGBTQ do not notice the rainbow sticker on the door when they walk in. But an LGBTQ person notices it immediately and first, and it says a lot oftentimes. So I don't know if you guys would add anything else for organizations or businesses that want to be more knowledgeable or open, but
gender neutral bathrooms is a big thing if you can. Bathrooms don't have to be gendered. I mean, it's just silly. We're in 2021, so just put public bathroom on the restrooms.
And in the state of Illinois, if it's a single bathroom, the law says it has to be gender neutral.
As of 2 years ago even, so like it's not like brand new, it's new, but it's not brand new, so like.
Really?
Yep, it's a single person bathroom.
I did not know. That's good.
Legally, it is a gender neutral bathroom. I would add that maybe if you want to really present serious about pronouns and that you're working towards that, adding it as part of your tag, like your signature on an email, I think that's a big signifier. I'm always like amazed when I see that with people, like, wow, you took that next step. Like you are showing everybody it is part of your signature. It's not something that's altered all the time. Like that to me is a big stamp of like, you are really trying.
And so on Zoom calls all day long, so putting it on your Zoom deadline.
Yep.
And even places like, I know Target now allows people to choose to put their pronouns on their name tag, so I think they should just have everybody put their pronouns on their name tags.
Yep.
But, that's something small that I think people would definitely notice.
So I hope that helps answer some questions as well. Any other questions or thoughts? I have to relieve my babysitter at 7:30, so I'm gonna have to run out here. But if you guys want to keep talking, keep talking.
The person who asked the parent question is gone, right?
Yes. But I can put you in contact with her.
Yeah, because she is free to get a hold of me or give people my number or whatever. So.
And I think that's an oftentimes overlooked area to work with. Like parents, this is maybe new for them, and if a parent is presenting themselves and wants to know better and wants to do better, we should have resources for them. Unfortunately, in our community, PFLAG has never really taken up off the ground, but there are resources out there for community or for parents, and I think that text line is amazing.
Yeah, and Barb and I have been throwing the PFLAG thing back around, trying to. And now that she let me know she's retiring, she asked me if I wanted to take it over, and I was like, I don't know if the interest is there, but as a personal resource, I am always available because there's just times that you just need to ask somebody a question, and if someone's willing to learn, we're willing to share.
If the Kankakee PFLAG does not continue on after Barb retires, the 10-lane park is actually very active.
It is
they
very
meet
active.
At least once a month.
I think it's the second Sunday of every month.
Something like that?
Yeah, at 2 o'clock.
I was mentoring there for a long time, but I'm not a big fan of traveling all the time, so.
And that's a reality of our community is, unfortunately, because services are not available here, people do travel an hour north, an hour south for lots of things. One of the things that, or more, one of the things that kind of shocked me and frustrates me and, to say pisses me off is healthcare. Our community, and I talked with higher ups at one of the local hospitals, endocrinologist is a doctor who a trans person would need to see for hormone replacement therapy. And our endocrinologists in our community refuse to work with trans patients with hormone replacement therapy. And that's a problem for me. I feel like that's part of your Hippocratic oath. So I talk to people that I know that are higher up at Riverside, and they talk. Sorry, Jesus. Let's bleep that out of the video. At a local hospital. And you know, that I think that's frustrating to me, and I think that's something we can do better in our community is having affirming healthcare for everyone. That seems like an obvious thing to me, and it may seem the way for you, but it's not. It is folks travel an hour or more to receive medication, and that's not okay.
But it's not even just endocrinologists. I would like to put my own experiences out there, is that when I look for new doctors, because I am trans and because that is part of who I am in my medical history, I disclose that like before I even make an appointment. I have had doctors, when I disclose that on the phone, will you treat a trans patient for a cold? I have been turned down by so many doctors in this area just to be a patient, period. Not for my hormones, not for anything. I mean, I have a cold, I need to be seen, will you see me? I found a list of 3 doctors that would say, yeah, whatever. There is one currently in the area that is like, oh, you're trans, that's fine, that's great, come on in. One.
And that's a great reference. That's another great purpose of the network is people come and post that. That is one of the things that people post all the time is I need a doctor who is affirming. And so, you know, we're working on kind of developing what we're calling the rainbow pages. Is these are providers and businesses that are just LGBT affirming. Because we get asked that all the time is who do you go to for this? Where do you go for this? That's safe. And so, you know, luckily we have each other and we have a place that we can all communicate with one another. But yeah, I guess that kind of stuff should piss people off into action, and I hope it does.
It should, yeah.
Like you said, it's part of the Hippocratic Oath. You should be treating anyone.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to know anybody's gender or what's in their pants to, oh, you need an antibiotic. Yeah.
Not necessary, right? Not necessary. We all have lungs, they're all. And I have a positive, I can throw out a positive experience. My child's pediatrician picked up that they were trans before we told her. And that pediatrician is in this area, and I do need to add her to the rainbow pages. But, so there are people who are learning, and I find pediatricians overall are more educated. I feel like they keep up on the new stuff, not new stuff, the current research maybe a little more. And the American Academy of Pediatrics has been great speaking out for trans kids. So, but there is, every service in our community should be representative of the population it serves. So we should have more, LGBTQ counselors, we should have doctors, we should have pastors, we should have librarians, we should have, everybody should be able to go into a place and see someone that they identify with.
And I'll add to that last thing that you just said was the community that they serve. I think one of the issues things that we get told often is that there wouldn't be enough trans patients for us to justify doing that. Or there wouldn't be, there's not enough gay people in this community or things like that. When I was younger and stupider, I did think that all LGBT people in this community just moved to Chicago. That's what I tried to do after school, right? I did think that. I recently saw a really amazing chart. It's a map of the United States, and it had counties, all the counties in the United States that had higher percentages than the national average of LGBTQ people. Guess what county is on that map? It blew my freaking mind that Kankakee County is on that map. We have a higher percentage of LGBTQ people in this community than the national average. We're the farthest south, well, we're not the farthest south in Illinois, but the farthest south, like, not suburb and not a big city in the state. So that speaks to me. That, to me, motivated me to say, yeah, actually, we do need to get an LGBTQ center in this community. We do need to have doctors that are working with LGBTQ folks. That, to me, that pisses me off into motivation, or into action. So, just another tidbit for you all to take home and think about. So just for my own selfish gain, I'm gonna wrap up. I think anyone who's willing to stick around and ask questions, if you have individual questions you want to ask any of us, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you those of you that are watching on YouTube for watching. We are accessible. I should have put a slide with all of our contact information, but I think we're all by our names on Facebook. and we're accessible. So if you ever need any sort of resources, feel free to reach out. You can access any of us through the Kankakee area LGBTQ network as well, messaging the group, or adding yourself. I'll vet you. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you.
And I'm right downstairs. Okay, second floor.
And one thing I want to throw out is we do have an LGBTQ teen group that meets once a month, and you can find out that information on the Facebook group. We'd love to get lots of 6th to 12th graders, plus graduated 19, around there, to join us, because we're trying to build a community for the kids. So if you know of anybody, send them our way.
Thank you all.
Perfect.